Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Faith, Fiction, and Folklore podcast, also known as the Tri-F podcast, where we try not to screw the podcast up. Turtle Chief, how are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Fantastic.
We have somebody new. Cody, how are you?
Hey, man. My name is Cody. It's good to be here. Glad you have me.
Excellent. Now, before we get started, you've got a Bigfoot thing next week? Did I hear that?
Yes. Yeah. We're. It's just a convention. I think it's more of a money grift than anything else, you know.
Don't show them our first podcast because I called them all vile city slickers that can't find anything. So I wouldn't advertise.
That's pretty accurate. That's pretty accurate. No, we're just going camping, man. It's gonna be pretty cool.
Cool. Sweet.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. So we decided to talk about the Screwtape Letters this week. Anybody have any thoughts they want to start off with? Like why they like the book or don't like the book or all that good stuff?
I mean, I really like it because you can apply it to your life and, learn from it.
Yeah.
What'd you learn, for example?
I mean, it's just kind of, that's it, huh? That's it.
That's it?
It's like,
Okay.
it's like trying to pick out the behaviors that you see playing out in your head. And you can use this book as a reference, like a guide to apply like negative thoughts you have to characters in the book or, you know, whatever, and fight them.
Yeah, I noticed that about the mother. You know, the sidelong glances that the demon instructs. What's the?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like you read into your parents' facial expressions until the point that somebody asks what's for dinner and you'll lose your mind.
Sure.
I do that.
Yeah.
Both. I ask for dinner and I lose my mind.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What I've found is if you have a thought and it's attached to an emotion, whether that emotion be positive or negative, it's probably like a thought demon per se.
Mm-hmm.
Which
That's
is
an interesting thing. This is actually, on that subject, this is actually kind of my bread and butter with Mind Matters News. We don't know where the mind is.
Yeah.
We have no idea where the center of the emotions are. And, Michael Egner, Dr. Michael Egner, he has researched the subject. And when they do epilepsy experiments, what's always really fascinating is if you take those electric rods and you poke and prod the brain, you make the arm move, you call up a memory, you cause a smell, whatever it is, the person in question, they can always tell when the scientist is doing it and when they're doing it, when they move their arm versus when the scientist makes them move their arm, which means that the mind is somewhere else. It's not in the brain. The brain's just responding to the stimulus. Something else is detecting whether or not it's them or a scientist. And so that calls into question, are your thoughts you in any particular way? What thoughts are you? What thoughts are a demon? What thoughts are an angel? Like, we don't know. Like, I kind of feel like our brain is kind of an antenna / kind of a translator.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah, and you're basically just interpreting input that's coming from the outside always. And I don't think there's any... Wherever the mind is, I don't think it's in the brain at all. I think that it's just interpreting sense data, and there's something else that's making judgment calls or like reflecting on that sense data. So,
I like the idea of the brain being an antenna, and I've also heard people say it's a basically for like memory collection. It's a warehouse for memories or pictures or whatever else. But to me the brain, like your cells are selves. So like all of you is your brain, basically. Like all of your little cells in your body are thinking the same way as a unit.
Gotcha.
So to go along with that, well, how would your soul and your spirit tie into that?
This is what I was taught. This actually gets into another point with something I actually disagreed with C.S. Lewis on. It was a minor nitpicky point, but it's relevant. So the way I was taught it growing up is that you have your mind, you have your body, which is your basic impulses and such. Then you have your spirit, which is like your antenna detecting what God wants and all that. And then you have your soul, which is a governor between the two. And C.S. Lewis actually makes this point in another book, which is kind of why I'm getting off topic. He makes the same point in another book where he talks about the only way mankind could be able to make a decision was if they were, in a sense, a trilateral being. So, for example, if you have a dog, like say you have a dog drowning in the water or whatever, one part of you, your spirit, is going to know that it is morally right. Not to say that it would definitely be morally right, but you would feel as if it is morally right to save the dog. Your body is going to be like, I don't want to get my clothes wet, and it's just a stupid dog. And it's going to think about the discomfort. And then there's this third part of you that will ultimately make the decision. And he uses that example. So it's the classic archetype of the devil and the angel on your shoulder. That's how all that interconnects. If that answers your question, Trevor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More or less.
More or less. Okay. So anyway, but this was what I got aggravated about in the Screwtape Letters when I was rereading it was he does make the comment that we're primarily animals and we're driven by impulses and instincts. And I don't, well, he doesn't say primarily. I got the sense reading it that it was primarily that we're animals, and I don't agree with that.
Well, that's what he was implying was that, that's what demons think of us.
Mm-hmm.
That could be, okay,
because they can get us there.
They're constantly around us trying to manipulate any situation to bring us down as Christians and as followers of Christ, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And they're terrified of believers because the more you believe, the more you're in tune with God and following God and in tune with Jesus, the more they want to bring you down. And so they're constantly having to, talk back and forth, lower powers to higher powers to figure out how to manipulate and control our lives.
Let me posit a question here. Actually, let me say hello to my wife really quick.
Hi, wife.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know you. I think.
I may not get to eat this. This is my dinner because I'm cutting. It's just a giant pile of chicken.
Chicken nutty.
Thank you.
Hi, guys.
Hey, there's
Hello.
the other one.
Says hi.
Hi.
They said hi.
So,
Um,
those are the people
anyways.
who tolerate us.
barely.
Well, let me posit a question on this vein. Do you think that maybe the reason our government and just people in general, let's say the demons in the spiritual realm as well, do you think they push hedonism because that slowly, in some way or fashion, turns humans into animals? So,
Absolutely.
for example, if you follow your impulses and cease to be reflective, you become more and more animal-like.
Yeah. The
Think
more
so?
the more God you turn off, the more animalistic you become.
Okay, yeah.
And so, demons, just like, what's his name? Screwtape in the book. He's always trying to subvert, trick you into thinking that, God's love is wrong, And even there's that one chapter he talks about, he keeps talking about God's love, just trying to figure it out in his own head, and it's like, he just keeps trying to figure it out. And he explains it perfectly. And then he gets reprimanded by Satan for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't talk about that.
Well, he even didn't reference God hardly at all. And when he did, he called him either the enemy or something else.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so honestly, C.S. Lewis is the patient, from my understanding. And you got Wormwood, who's a base demon following
Demon in training. Yeah.
Demon in training, following C.S. Lewis around as kind of his devil on his shoulder. And then he's writing his frustrations to Screwtape. And Screwtape is kind of like a captain or like commander of the region.
Sure.
He's a very affectionate and ravenous uncle.
Yeah.
Affectionate. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite
there a
scenes.
chapter-
I'm sorry, go on.
Isn't there a chapter where he talks about how he is affectionate towards Wormwood?
Affectionate towards who?
Wormwood.
Wormwood?
He's right.
Yeah.
He's right into
Most of the
Wormwood.
chapters he says that,
Yeah.
which
It's
is a
like-
great point.
Yeah. Well, I think
like-
one of my favorite scenes is kind of funny, or at least it's the most visual, is at one point, I can't remember why, but, Screwtape loses his temper with the Wormwood, and then he turns into a centipede, and the secretary has to finish the letter. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I find, back to that point on affectionate, every time he says that, you can tell some of the vigor dies throughout the book, at least in the John Cleese reading of it. Because he really embodies that. He's like, like the more letters go on, the more frustrated Screwtape gets with Wormwood. So he's just like, by the end, he can't even say he's an affectionate uncle anymore. Like, So,
Yeah.
Until he gets to eat him at the
I
end.
guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, until he gets to eat him at the end. They lose the guy in the bombing, and
Right.
then he adds the word ravenous at the end. So, yeah.
It's great. But yeah, I mean, I think the best part of the book is that it makes you able to do that. You're able to laugh at demons, and they hate that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great takeaway from the book, because it teaches you how to laugh at demons.
Right. And there's a great line in there about how neither side really has the appropriate attitude towards demons. What does he say? He says something to the effect of, we love or we approve of the magicians and the skeptics equally.
Yeah.
No, the materialists and the magicians equally. Both
Yeah.
sides get it wrong. One holds demons in an improper reverence, and the other ignores their existence altogether. Neither side's incorrect.
Right.
I thought that was a very astute thing
it's a great
to say.
point.
Yep. So.
Yeah. Man, I wish I would have taken notes today at that time.
Yeah, that's the problem with audios. I was listening to it on Audible at 1.7 speed because I was I was in the gym, so I didn't take this very in-depth notes on it. But yeah, there is some stuff in there that I do think is interesting. I was a little, I don't know which version you listened to, Cody. You said you listened to the one of John Cleese.
Yeah.
Mine was a different one, and the one that I listened to had the addition of Screwtape proposes a toast to it. Did the Cleese one have that one?
That's the last chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was like something he wrote years later. I was very interested in what he said at the end of that about equality. And I don't know, I don't think he had a certain amount of contempt for equality. There was a part of me that, in reading that last portion, that felt like there was a little bit of some monarchy sentiments, like a little bit of hostility towards like the American conception of equality. Like, if you tell everybody they're equal, then they're, the people that aren't really working for it are going to get kind of big-headed. And as I listened on, particularly in as I listened on, I wondered if he meant what we would call equity today. The idea that everybody deserves to end up in the same place, regardless of merit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the subversion with it. I mean, even in the pretext of the book, it says to not take. It gives a warning to not take what Screwtape says as factual, even though it's coming from a place of authority. So it's like he's trying to trick people. You know, like that's his job.
Right. That's the tricky thing about it. I guess it would be, the tricky part about the second person POV is some of it is what C.S. Lewis is reflecting about his own opinions about the society at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's projecting that through the demon, and then the demon comes to erroneous conclusions. But it's hard to know what true opinions C.S. Lewis had. Apologies, that's my phone. From which, it's hard to know what true opinions C.S. Lewis had and where those opinions end and where Screwtape's distortion of the truth actually begins. Does that make sense? And I had some issues with that. I couldn't always tell. Like, for example, the animal thing. Was the demon saying that humans are primarily animals? Or was that kind of an adopting of I guess you would say, an evolutionary
that was my take.
That we're primarily biological creatures. And that's one of my contentions with a lot of the way things are taught in the modern day is because we assume that we're primarily biological, we end up with this kind of presupposition that rather than having a fallen sin nature, we believe that there's an inner beast in us that can't be killed but only contained. And they conflate the fallen nature of the soul, which is a spiritual malady, turning love into lust and so on. We conflate that spiritual malady with the physical malady of having like bestial urges. And those are not the same thing. So I didn't know if C.S. Lewis was piggybacking off of this idea that our fallen nature is really our biology, which I disagree with, or if that was, or if that was the demon's perspective.
Yeah, I didn't get that feeling. I mean, but that's just from the perspective of the book. So I didn't know C.S. Lewis, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like he was a pretty base guy and probably knew, that we weren't just animals. Like we have a spirit connection with God.
Well, let me make a correction here. It's not just that we're just animals. It's that the fallen nature is our matter, not our spirit. Does that make sense? Like our bestial urges are the fallen nature. Like our biological programming is the fallen nature. And I would argue that's not true. But I think some Christians make that conflation. So just to maybe better articulate what I meant when I said all of that stuff before. But so, and I mean, I think you're right, Cody, based on his other stuff that I've read. It seems like he understands the spiritual nature of man and emphasizes that above the spirit more than a lot of other authors I've heard. So I was a little taken aback with the Screwtape line, but I just wasn't sure if it was Screwtape's opinion or his or whatever. So anyway.
Well, I had a curious thought was, he was in World War II, right?
I believe so.
Was it one?
It was one. Yeah, World War One.
So this is just a thought. What if he actually came across like actual German letters of possibly like a German leader to one of his captains or something?
Oh, just based on the behaviors.
And he like found a shoebox or something full of letters, and he actually put this story together using that. That was just a curiosity of mine.
Yeah, you'd have to be a pretty vindictive person to hate humanity that much, though. Like to hate you'd have to have a lot of self-hate,
Yeah. And to want to eat your nephew.
Yeah, especially that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that does happen.
Eating your nephew?
It does happen.
I believe it.
Yeah. Brings a whole new meaning to wormwood, huh?
Yeah.
So what, either one of you, what after going through this, what have you taken away from it and been able to apply to your life?
Trevor, you want to lead with that?
Well, honestly, I could listen to this over and over and over again and apply it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, I've struggled with that. I've struggled with that. I'm struggling with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so many different things that he, like I said, you know, I think it's C.S. Lewis talking about his own personal life, and these two demons are talking about him, and Wormwood has been following him around, trying to manipulate how he acts, basically. And then C.S. Lewis gets saved, and Screwtape calls Wormwood, you know, and he's like, or writes to him, and he's like, you failed. You're a failure. And it's like, oh, yeah. But they're going to continue and try to manipulate things even after you're saved. And it's just, it's kind of.
Oh, that was something I wanted to bicker about. Sorry, go on, Trevor. I'll hold my thought.
Yeah, let's hear your thought.
Oh, the idea that you can lose your salvation after you've been saved once, I didn't appreciate. But he was an Anglican, so I can't argue. Like, I can't fault him for it. That was their thing. Or is their thing, I think. One of their things.
It's a thing. Everything is a thing.
Well, their doctrine. Like, they think you can lose your salvation. They're one of the denominations that think you can lose your salvation. So.
Oh, I don't know. There's several of them, actually, that think you can lose it.
Yeah. I think once saved, always saved is actually in the minority as far as, like, the number of denominations are concerned. But that's what I think anyway, and everybody else can just be wrong. That's perfectly fine. So to answer Cody's question, before we can circle back to that later, but to answer Cody's question, the thing that jumped out at me that I probably need to work on is reading into people's facial expressions. And which is probably why I brought it up as soon as I did, because I expect people to see what I'm doing and take it at face value, but I look at sidelong glances and build a whole story around them. And
well, who doesn't do that?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that. But that's something I need to work on, is being a little more or a little less eager to assume people's motives and intentions behind a sidelong glance or a wink or whatever.
Yeah.
So what about you, Cody?
Awesome. I just get into gravy land whenever I start thinking about it, man. Have you guys looked into the Jerry Marzinski?
Mm-mm.
Oh man, it's related. He was a clinical psychologist, and he spent about 40 years in a state penitentiary, like one of the biggest ones in the U.S.
I might have read this. Go on, keep describing it.
He's great. But anyways, he's started looking at patients, and he figured out that the way that they were handling mental illness was not up to par. And so he started seeing a lot of patterns in these patients and meth addicts alike. So they had a lot of bipolar, schizophrenic, and meth addicts.
I know who you're talking about. What'd you say his name was? I'm going to type that in because I'm almost...
Jerry Marzinski.
Jerry Marzinski. I am almost certain that I have read his book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't read his book. I just listened to a bunch of interviews.
Like demonic possession and schizophrenia type topics.
Yeah.
Journey into the psychotic mind.
Yeah.
Let me see.
I've
read that book.
Yeah.
That's
you see
awesome.
a lot of patterns between like the Screwtape Letters and what this guy says. So it connects a lot of dots for me. But I'm definitely able to apply it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what he said. Because it's there's always been kind of this weird, well, I just think that how do I put this? I'm trying to figure out the best way to begin this thought. I have always figured that Freud basically took concepts that were in the Bible, such as mind, body, and spirit, or mind, soul, soul, spirit, mind, and then relabeled them id, ego, superego. So he took concepts in the Bible because he was a Christian, and then he basically labeled those concepts, and then everything else he said was basically cocaine. So for example, the whole you're secretly in love with your mother. It's like, no, that's cocaine.
I don't know. I think that's true.
You think you're secretly in love with your mom?
To a point, until you, well, not everybody.
Not everybody.
It's like once you forgive your mother, you stop resenting her, and you stop, looking like her, for lack of a better word.
No, I do think that forgiveness is how you kind of quit that familial cycle in dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
He was talking about wanting to have relations with your mom when you're a kid. Yeah, like it was weird pedophilia stuff. And I'm like, that's cocaine.
Yeah.
But they also wanted to break down the family unit. And I haven't been able to verify this, but I haven't gotten all the way through it, but I started Jack Posobiec's Unhumans book. It's talking about communism, future of communism. And he made the comment that Freud and Marx were actually running around in basically the same equivalent, like the early 20th century equivalent, or late 19th century equivalent of coffee shops. Like him and Marx were buddies, and they were having coffee together and talking about how to overthrow Western civilization and replace it with communism.
Yeah.
So,
which is why we're in the middle of cultural Marxism. So.
Yeah, they started all that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Masters
of mankind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That we need to go over that book. I didn't realize you knew who Marzinski was.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of hours listening to his stuff. I haven't read anything, but
yeah, I read his book and I listened to one interview, and I've been very interested in the guy. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.